Welcome to Rates and Barrels, Tuesday, January 13th. It is the start of our position preview series. We're going to begin today with shortstops, the way our position preview series typically works. Eno and I go through all of the players at a position, or at least as many of them as we reasonably can. We group them by average draft position, so we can talk about them in the context of roster construction and what is actually happening in paid drafts right now over at the NFBC. And hopefully we can paint a good picture of what you should or possibly should not do as you're building rosters over the course of the next 3 months or so. How's it going for you on this Tuesday? How pumped are you to kick off this series for season number 8?
I'm excited. I feel a little bit more prepared than usual. I don't know why. Started my drafts a little early, started my prep a little early. The pitching ranks are already coming into focus. I'm just, after a while you get used to it and you start, getting you're ahead of yourself and it's not, without trying too hard. So I feel pretty good.
All right. That's where I'm at too. I think the draft and hold season's been a good thing over the years to get us a little more up to speed on the shape of positions. Some of the what happens if you try to wait here and address a position later, all those things kind of get answered in the form of a problem, which I find to be particularly helpful. But we're going to start at the top of the board as we always do. These are shortstops that are going to go within the first 2 rounds typically of a 15-team draft. So top 30 overall players. That includes Bobby Witt Jr., Elly de la Cruz, Gunnar Henderson, Francisco Lindor, mini tier break, because those guys are all either first rounders or fringe first rounders. And then you've got Trea Turner and Zach Neto coming off the board typically by the end of round 2. Let's start with Witt. I mean, the underlying skills are phenomenal. 30 homers and 49 steals 2 years ago, 32 and 31 last year. He's an 8 WAR player. I mean, just a phenomenal all-around talent. I think he's a fine option if you draw the 3rd overall pick, right? Most leagues are going to start with Ohtani and Judge as the first 2 players off the board. Witt could easily be justified in that number 3 spot. You'll probably see him or a Juan Soto or a Jose Ramirez, maybe a Tarek Skubal, depending on who's in the room and how they like to build their teams. But I can't find a flaw, because you usually can't find a flaw for guys that go in that part of our drafts.
Yeah, and with the news that the stadium there is going to be different, that Kauffman is going to change its walls and come in and they're going to come down, I think the projections are going to be, the 50th percentile projection, not the he could go 30-30. I think he will be projected to go 30-30 this year. And that's just an excellent thing to start with, because if you just put him up against somebody like Elly de la Cruz, who comes behind him, or even Gunnar Henderson, he's just very likely to hit those 30-30 numbers with a good average and without any inkling of a flaw. I mean, Elly's plate discipline, strikeout rate, those sort of things, do give you sort of just a whiff of a flaw.
Yeah, that's to me why you see Witt a couple spots ahead of Elly pretty consistently, right? But I think if we want to talk about Elly, he's fascinating because he played all 162 games in 2025, despite some quad and hamstring injuries. And I think those injuries explain why the stolen bases fell off, especially in the second half. We talk a lot about the impact of healthy legs on power. The power outage for Elly was real in the second half too. Had a long stretch without a homer. I mean, this guy was sitting with 18 homers and 22 steals at the end of June. He hit 4 more homers and stole 15 bases from July 1st onward, so clearly not the same player, despite the fact that he was gunning it out that entire time. The big story for me with Elly, beyond the injuries though, he lowered the strikeout rate. Got down to 25.9% last season. Easily a career best, down from the 30+% marks we'd seen in each of his first 2 seasons. So I think everything you see on the health side explains why Elly didn't quite match the power speed combo we saw in 2024. And I have little reason to believe he can't just bounce back to that level.
Yeah, I think the most important number is 24 years old. I mean, that's still, when you talk about aging curves and peak seasons, even if you think it's 26 years old as a peak in baseball, that is on the lower side. Some people think it's more 27 plus. But if you think it's 26, that's still 2 years. 2 years of improvement that would usually come mostly in K percentage and ground ball rate. Those are the two things that Elly is the worst at. So if he's only going to get better in those two things and nothing else, that would lead to more homers, better batting average, just a better overall line. He hits the ball so hard. He's so athletic, so fast. I think he's going to get those steals totals back up again. And I think this could be the year that we have a 30-40 from him. But that's more could. Like I said with Bobby Witt, that's the more 50th percentile. 50th percentile for Elly is, a 260 average, 25 homers and 40 steals. Still great. Still a lot to love there. I will say the targets for 15-team leagues are right around 260. I have 258 finishing third in a 15-team league, and at least one projection has Elly hitting that. That sounds fine. What's the problem? The problem is you're going to get worse batting averages later. So if you pick Elly, and I did this, the last couple of years, I've done this a couple times, you won't have a top 3 batting average in your league. It's just, you can try to do something about it. It's almost like Giannis's free throw percentage in fantasy basketball. It's just going to set you off on the wrong track, and it's going to be really hard to undo. You'll have to pick 2 or 3 Stephen Kwan types, and you have to really think about it, and you won't, and it'll be hard to do, and you should rather just say, hey, I'm going to take Elly, and I'm not going to have a top batting average in my league.
The only other thing with Elly that I want to throw out there is I'm a little disappointed that the ground ball rate ticked up last year. He went from 46.3% to 51.3%. That's sort of the limiting factor on the power. I think in terms of the quality of the contact he makes, the home ballpark he plays in, I definitely see the 30 home run ceiling as something he can attain, but how he gets there is just lifting the ball more consistently. And maybe as a switch hitter, you're talking about a guy that just takes a little bit longer to find it from both sides. We're seeing some of that improvement from the right side.
That is a really great thing to bring up, because he used to have one of the biggest differences in bat speed between left and right. In 2024, he had a 3-mile-an-hour difference between batting left and batting right, which just suggests that mechanically he's just an entirely different player. Last year, the difference was down to 0.7 miles per hour. So he's really brought the right side up and made him a more complete hitter. And I think that's, I talked to Pablo Sandoval back in the day a lot about this, where he just felt he was a completely different hitter from both sides. And so sometimes I think switch hitters take a little bit of a while to kind of solidify that. You even see switch hitters sometimes leave switch hitting, like Cedric Mullins did, because it didn't get to that point where they got good at both sides. But I think Elly's doing that. He's ironing things out, and I think a healthier season this year. This could be, and like he is, I think these top three guys and Gunnar, Henderson, even Lindor, they are MVP quality players. They could win the MVP. They have that type of ability. They're going to give you the defensive component that you need. And they've been really, Francisco Lindor has posted, and Gunnar Henderson posted last year, despite what we find out is a shoulder impingement. And the fact that he was able to do what he did last year, despite the shoulder impingement. I mean, he still hit 17 homers, stole 30 bases, and was a top 6 shortstop by wins above replacement. I think Gunnar Henderson is up for a big year too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because on the position previews, it's not always either or in the actual decision at the draft table. It's sort of waiting a little bit and putting the pieces together. But Gunnar versus Lindor is an either or. If you're sitting in one of those last positions in round 1, they're both likely to be sitting there. Lindor continues to do this at a slightly advanced age, let's say. I mean, one missing steal in 2024 kept him from going 30-30 in 3 consecutive seasons. So that's the level you're getting. The Mets lineup, still very good. I think the best argument against Lindor is because of his age. Plate appearance volume can really only go down. He just maxed that out. We saw that with some of the peak seasons from Marcus Semien a few years ago. When you're out there every single day in a prominent spot in the lineup, like only bad things can happen to your playing time. Minor injuries, major injuries, whatever it might be. Maybe the other skills thing with Lindor that gives you just a tiny bit of hesitation is that the barrel rate has slipped back to the 8% range, kind of his career norms. So I think if you're looking at Gunnar versus Lindor, the age difference is a big one. You don't have as long of a track record with Gunnar, but I think you probably have a higher batting average expectation from Gunnar Henderson. That might be the thing that differentiates them from me, is like, I might want the 265, 270 expectation instead of a 250s, like low 260s expectation from Lindor.
Yeah, I just think the error bars are pointing in the wrong direction for Lindor. I love him. I think he's a Hall of Famer. He's already got 60 Fangraphs WAR, which is, puts him in that conversation already. He's got plenty of time left. But at 32, that's where a certain types of stats start to go into the tank. Your ability to make contact on outside pitches, outside the zone, goes into the tank right around 32. Bat speed starts to decline seriously right around 32. He also had off-season elbow debridement procedure on his elbow. Doesn't sound like a big deal. He's not a pitcher. Will it affect him at the plate? Who knows? But what if it affects his normal off-season? What if he's doing more rehab than just normal off-season procedure? I could just see all of these questions kind of going the other direction. It's true. If Gunnar Henderson had an elbow debridement, it had a shoulder impingement. If Gunnar Henderson had a shoulder impingement, and Francisco Lindor has this elbow problem, why am I focusing on one and not the other? That's a fair thing to ask, but I would say, again, 32 years old. And also, having surgery is worse than not having surgery. I think that's worth saying, because players themselves are trying to avoid surgery as long as possible. So the fact that Gunnar didn't have surgery and Francisco did have surgery, that is a difference. So for me, it's pretty clearly Gunnar there if I have the choice. If I'm gonna get Lindor coming back, if somebody else just took Gunnar ahead of me, I think I will take Lindor, because I do see a cliff after him. Because if you take Lindor, you can't take Neto, and you won't get Neto at your next pick, and you probably won't get Trea Turner at your next pick. So if you don't take Lindor, your shortstop is going to be Bichette, Peña, those guys. So Lindor is a bit of a last chance saloon if you're not, if you value him ahead of Neto. Do you value Lindor ahead of Neto? That one is actually by composite projections, it's $1 difference. But again, the same things we said about Gunnar Henderson, you could say about Zach Neto. He's younger. He's further away from his elbow surgery. And if you look at Zach Neto's numbers, just over time, it's pretty amazing. All of these things have gotten better since he's had the surgery. You can see the slugging on the left. The slugging has generally gotten better over time. The hard hit rate has gotten better over time. The bat speed has gotten better over time. The barrel rate has gotten better over time. I kind of like Zach Neto. I think it'd be hard for me to take Neto, who hasn't done what Lindor has done, ahead of Lindor. But if you did it, I would understand why.
I had not made plans to do that. It has not come up as an actual problem I've had to solve. But I do think that the Neto underlying numbers are really encouraging. I was worried about him coming off of shoulder surgery. They were very withholding of the details of like what it was actually even fixed in Neto's shoulder. Slightly delayed start to the 2025 season, but the contact quality went through the roof. He spiked up to a 14% barrel rate and a 46.6% hard hit rate. Barrels went up because he lifted the ball more often. This looks like a 30-30 guy to me. And I think you could definitely make the argument that Neto belongs in that conversation with Lindor. I think you can do that. I think it's a lower batting average and OBP compared to the likes of Henderson. And so like maybe that's where the separation is quality of the lineups and the lower walk rate from Neto might be things that just hold down his value a little bit. The counting stats could lag relative to guys that are on better teams, but he's a really nice player for them. And I like him a lot where he goes. If I'm sitting there with an early first round pick, comes back to me in round 2, and Neto's still on the board, I'm totally fine taking him at his price.
And we have a lot of listeners who play 10 and 12 team leagues. If you want to pair Lindor and Neto at the top, I say go for it. I mean, there's a chance you go 60-60 at the top with a good batting average. I mean, how could you do much better than that? I know you'll be filling up your MI, your middle infield slot, or whatever it is. But again, barrel rates, like at this point, a lot of the other stuff doesn't mean as much, because bat speed is something that means a lot in the first couple of days. It doesn't mean as much once you've had the track record that Neto does. And what Neto does is, he has great tilt. he lifts the ball and he makes the most of his bat speed. He's a guy who basically pulls it in the air. If you look at his spray chart, it's pretty amazing. So the fact that he's getting healthy and he's relatively swinging it better, and he's so much younger than Lindor. I mean, that's why the composite projections have them almost as a pick 'em. The ADP has a 20 pick difference between them, which means, in a 10 or 12 team league, you might be able to pull it off.
The other player that goes in this bunch, goes kind of next to Neto in terms of his ADP, is Trea Turner. He was a top 15 hitter in the Fangraphs player rater last year, despite a dip in power, and he's got some nagging hamstring injuries. I think we're at the point in Turner's career, and maybe Lindor is kind of like this too, even though he hasn't had as many injury woes that have cost him time in season. You start to expect 140 games instead of 155. That might just be the safer way to go about it. But Turner is aging more gracefully than a lot of other speedy infielders we've seen in our lifetimes, and part of that's because he's not just a speedster. So how much of a dip in power are you expecting this year from Turner? Do you think we found a new safe level of a plateau with the 15 homers last year? Do you think he could actually bounce back? Because I think that's going to make or break that pick a little bit for people that decide to make that in 2026.
I'm not expecting a huge bounce back. I think that people are comparing him to peak versions of himself and are thinking that he's so much worse and are missing the fact that he's still really good, because composite projections, which only give him 600 plate appearances and about 140 games, still say he's going to hit about 20 homers and steal more than 30 bases, and say that he's worth 50 cents less than Zach Neto. And that's nothing, So if Lindor and Neto go, or if you want to take him over Neto because he's more of a sure thing, or you want this to be more shaded towards steals. He did have 36 steals last year. If you want to make sure you get your steals early, I actually like Turner. I think Turner and Neto are the actual last chance saloons. I'm saying Lindor is one because you won't be able to get Neto or Turner on the way back in a 15-team league.
Yeah.
But if you're just looking at straight rankings, I see a big tier here. Trea Turner is the last of the comfortably above $20 players. And that's where I feel I want him if it's somewhere deep into the second round. I don't have a shortstop yet, because otherwise I'm going to be very tempted to take a long pause on the position, even as much as 100 ADP. And we'll talk about those players that we like later, but I'm not saying I don't like any shortstops later. It's just that's the last chance, I think, to get a premium shortstop.
I think the other thing you want to think about is how important batting average is in your foundation, though, too. You can give up 10 homers or even 15 homers possibly between Neto and Turner, but you might end up with a guy that hits 285 or 290 over a high volume of playing time in Turner, and that changes a lot about how things come together in that category. So they get there in slightly different ways, but very comparable in terms of their overall value. Let's get to the second tier. 4 players in this group: CJ Abrams, Mookie Betts, Geraldo Perdomo, and Jeremy Peña. In terms of overall, where are we? We're kind of outside the top 50 overall. So in a 15-team league, kind of late round 4 for the likes of Betts and Abrams, they kind of go as a toss-up. Perdomo goes about 20 picks after that, right around pick 75, and Peña goes even further after that, but still inside the top 100. So that's how he sneaks into this second tier for us. So basically between picks 50 and 100, you have these 4 guys. Abrams in 2025 really was a carbon copy of 2024. He's kept a sub 20% K rate for his career. He held under the hard hit rate gains that we saw in 2024. It was a 39.2% hard hit rate. I think you just get excited because he's only 25. We've talked about his unusually fast track through the minors as a result of a major injury one year in the Padres system and because of the canceled 2020 minor league season. So you could tell yourself that Abrams is among those players, and Neto kind of, because he cruised through the minor leagues too, has this maybe he gets better because he got there so quickly. Maybe it's year 3 or year 4 where something else clicks in terms of a plate discipline. You could definitely talk yourself into that for Abrams. But even if this is a plateau, if this is just a what you see is what you get kind of player, I think the way you could talk yourself into Abrams being a little better in 2026 is the supporting cast around him getting better. If you're a believer in what the Nats young core could do, if you think James Wood and Dylan Cruz and some of the guys they're going to rely upon more heavily this year are going to keep getting better, then the runs and the RBIs might tick up a little bit more for CJ Abrams, even if his individual skills don't change all that much.
There's something I don't like about the package. I mean, this may seem random, but he is going to be, by Jordan Rosenblum's defensive projections, he is the worst shortstop in baseball last year. This is using StatCast to make defensive projections. It's not, in necessarily as we record this in Oopsie projections right now, but it will be. But right now, he's the worst shortstop defensively. I only bring that up because that's an externality. That's an other thing that may just bother him. It may be something that he needs to work on. Remember, Mookie Betts saw his his offense slip when he spent the entire offseason thinking about defense. What if it just becomes a point of emphasis for him this offseason? He's not thinking about hitting as much. And also, it just speaks to what is the conversation going to be around CJ Abrams. The entire conversation this year about CJ Abrams will be, should we trade him? Is he a part of the next good Nationals team? And I don't think that that's necessarily going to be healthy for him either. Lastly, just on those are two non-numbers things, and I will bring things up like that every once in a while because I do have I have an inner Ian Khan, and I just feel like this could be set up for not a great season for him in terms of what the conversation is going to be around him. But just based on just the numbers alone, his composite projection is behind Bo Bichette, Jeremy Peña, Corey Seager, and Mookie Betts, while his ADP is ahead of all of them. So that's just something I'm not going to get into. I mean, that's not going to be. I mean, don't we have him on our the market is cooler on him sheet that we have here? I think he's on there. Yes, look at that. The ADP versus the composite rank. Konnor Griffin has the biggest difference. I think that's just. We're in draft and hold season. People are going to take chances on this guy. And I think that might change over time. The composite rank has projections where Konnor Griffin has 300 plate appearances. If he starts playing a lot in spring, all those guys will change their depth charts. He'll have 400, 450 plate appearances. That'll change. But Perdomo, Abrams, and Story are the three most premium shortstops where the market likes them better than the composite projections. And I'm not saying I'm going to avoid all of these guys, but I probably won't end up with many of them.
Yeah, we're going to get into Perdomo in just a minute, but I do think you have this choice between Abrams, the young guy that maybe finds a way to get better, versus Mookie Betts, a guy that looks like a future Hall of Famer that started to look more like himself in the second half. I think by now people know that Mookie had that illness coming out of spring, causing him to lose more than 15 pounds. He just didn't look like himself for most of the first half of the season. Second half slash line was 279, 342, 442. For the season, he still popped 20 homers. The running game contribution slipped despite the fact that he topped 600 plate appearances for the third time in the last 4 seasons. And obviously the defense at shortstop became phenomenal. I mean, that kept his real life value at a pretty high level despite all of the things that were going wrong for him at the plate. But if you're just thinking about this, and the answer could be neither. Like, who are you more likely to take at their price? If you're sitting there in the later part of round 4, you didn't take a shortstop already, and you want to make sure you get someone that you see as an everyday player that's just good across the board, I get the feeling Mookie Betts' balance and historical production probably speaks to you a lot more than the uncertainty with Abrams.
Yes, I mean, you brought up the one part that I believe in the least, which is his defense. His StatCast projection is to be one of the worst 10 in the league. And it's okay. He is an otherworldly athlete and a future Hall of Famer, so it is possible that he could make this transition that nobody else almost in the history of baseball has ever made and do it well. So I'm just saying, I'm betting with the history of baseball that like he's not a great shortstop. I know that you can give me whatever numbers you did about what he did last year, but I'm just gonna go with the idea that like no one's ever done this before, and there's a reason, and we usually don't do this late in careers like this. But hey, maybe he's a really great shortstop again this year. I think he'll be passing, because I don't really think the Dodgers have a great other option anyway. So as long as he's not terrible, he'll stay in the position. He did start a bat speed training late in the season, You see an uptick in his bat speed late in the season. So I think he will clear the 22, 23 homers that he's projected for, maybe 24, 25. I do think that his line will look pretty similar to Bichette's, actually, even though they are completely different players. And though Bichette does things I don't like that won't age well in terms of chasing outside the zone and things like that, it's not yet time for Bichette to hit the tank when it comes to chasing outside the zone. It's not yet time to be too worried about that. What I see instead is a projection for a 290 average, 17 homers and 6 steals from Bichette. And that comes, 30, 40 picks later? So yep. I think my answer is neither when it comes to Betts and Abrams. Now, if Betts falls in a draft I'm in just because someone says he's old and now he's at the same price as Bichette and I can get him at 100, at pick 100, then I'll take Mookie Betts. At the same price, I take Mookie Betts over Bichette. But if I can sneak in another player, sneak in a third baseman, and then go back and get Bichette later, I'll do that.
I've been looking at Mookie so far and saying he's absolutely safe at the price. I don't think he's going to hurt you if you take him as a late 4th rounder. The runs and the RBIs are going to be there. The average, 258 seems like the worst case scenario that we just saw. Everything was going wrong for him physically at the beginning of the season. There's a chance he hits 280 again. And projections have him between 262 and 273.
That's
he
what
hit
the
20
skills
home runs
mostly,
when he felt awful.
Right, yeah, that's true. And the skill set says he's going to hit it for a good batting average. He always has, and he has the skill set for it.
Right, and it's non-zero speed, whereas, Bo and even Corey Seager and some of the other guys that go a little bit later, they do not run at all. Maybe Mookie gets back to 12 to 15 steals. Not impossible. You don't have to pencil him in for that. So I just think he's totally safe where he's going right now. I could understand choosing him over Abrams because of the protection you get from having quality Dodgers lineup around him and knowing that Mookie is just a huge fixture in that lineup, regardless of where his glove plays, even though I think it will be shortstop all year. And I think I'm a little higher on his defense holding up. I don't think he's going to do everything he did defensively in 2025 again, but I think that facet will age a little less harshly than you expect it to.
This whole tier is full of landmines to me. It is a really problematic tier where I have players highlighted as values and I have players highlighted as stayaways, one after the other. Jeremy Peña's in this tier. And while I don't think he's going to fall off a cliff, he is an athlete and he's still in his peak age range. I don't necessarily think that there's much growth left. And so if he's just going to hit 270 and be like a 15-15 guy, then he has almost the exact same value as Corey Seager, a completely different package. But, he's going to play more. Corey Seager's going to play less. Corey Seager's going to hit homers and not steal bases. It's going to, Corey Seager's going to hit 50 points higher in batting average maybe. But if they're the same, why is there like a 25-point difference in ADP? So I think if you are not going to take a shortstop in the top tier and you want one in here, then you need to do some real research on this tier because there are winners and losers. And I want to stay away from Peña and Abrams. I'll take Seager is going 120, 140 in some drafts. I'll take that. I'll have to get steals somewhere else, and I get it. You expect to get steals from shortstop, but Seager's great when he's in. In terms of his WRC plus on the field over the last 3 years, he's like a top 10 guy. So Seager is somebody to bet on.
I think the Peña case is a really tough one because historically it's been a really low walk rate. We've seen 2 seasons out of the 4 he's been in the big leagues where he's been under 4%. That to me makes the OBP flimsy, which makes his place in the lineup flimsy. You do have some questions about the teeth of this Astros lineup compared to past Astros lineup, but once Peña got into that leadoff spot in late April, he really locked that down. So I do think there's a pretty nice floor with what he brings to the table. He has lots of ways to at least get you $15 in value, which is good. I think we're going to look at 2025 and say that was the career year. That was as good as it gets, but that doesn't mean he's going to be bad. It just means he's probably going to go back to being like a 3.5 WAR sort of player. And it's more of a break even than a big profit from where he's going right now. I actually find
but he's safer than he's safer than a lot of the guys in here, right? Like I feel like he's safer than Abrams. He's probably safer even than Seager, honestly.
Yeah, because of Seager's combination of injuries, I think is just brutal. Like they're all kind of between the knees and the hips, right? Like most of it's that middle third of the body, and he's like, well, that stuff's all connected. That's that seems very chronic in nature. I think with Peña, there's a little bit more flukiness in some of the injuries he's dealt with. I don't have a strong argument against Peña. I think there's other players at other positions that go around there that end up commanding my attention. That's what seems to happen with Jeremy Peña. Geraldo Perdomo, though, is one of the most odd players in the pool to analyze right now, because what he did a season ago came out of relative nowhere, right? The D-backs gave him that extension. The consensus reaction, including my reaction, your reaction, was like, hey, cool. They like him. He's a good defensive player. And, maybe they like his glove. They like his leadership. He doesn't hit the ball very hard, even though he controls the strike zone. He's just sort of an okay sort of player, right? Safely a 2-win player year over year. And it's fine to have that. Look at 2025. He puts this season together that none of us could have seen coming. It was a career best 11.5% strikeout rate, part of a 3-year run of improvement. He paired that with a 31.9% hard hit rate, which still isn't great, but when you strike out as little as Perdomo does, that hard hit rate carries a little bit more weight. Projections aren't coming close to calling for a repeat. Makes sense. You put a few seasons on the ledger that don't look at all like 2025. Those are still going to be put into consideration. The lower than you'd like hard hit rate, still a factor. If Perdomo repeats, and he's going around pick 75, he's a huge bargain. No one expects a full repeat, but if he could even repeat 80% of what he did, he's underpriced right now. And the downside is that if we learn that 2025 was some kind of massive historical outlier and somehow is mostly just unsustainable, then you're passing on some pretty good players where he goes. So I think that's where you get that tension of like, should I really do this? We're going to dig into some of the changes that he made to his swing when we talk to Jed on an episode next week. But the more I look at Perdomo, the more I'm starting to believe, because he changed the swing on both sides of the plate. He makes really good decisions. He makes a lot of contact in the zone. He doesn't whiff on secondaries. I mean, I couldn't believe this stat when I looked it up. Perdomo hit more balls 95 plus in the air last season than Elly de la Cruz. That is wild to me, right? Because we have this assumption that Perdomo just does not get to his power enough, but he's got at least ample power, and then he added a lot of speed. He was all over the place on the base pass last year. So there's a lot of ways Perdomo can still be really good. He was 27 for 33 last year as a base stealer. He's going to play every day. It's a good OBP. It's a solid average. There's some disagreement on the batting average projections. Down at 254, we have the Bat X. Up at 270, we have Steamer. So even the projections have quite a bit of noise in this profile.
Yeah, I'm not saying he's not an athlete, but he just leaves me a little bit cold in the athletic department. He was 40th percentile sprint speed the last couple of years. He's, in terms of bat speed, he's 7th percentile. And yes, he improved a little bit in those categories, and there are some small changes to his swing. I do think he's really good at getting the most out of his athleticism. You see this when you look at certain players. They have the red slidey bars on StatCast down at the bottom. Those are the guys who are really good at not striking out and walking, and Perdomo has that. And then there's guys more like the Joe Adells who have their red slidey things at the top, where it's bat speed and barrel rate and all that stuff. And that's where Perdomo is blue. I just generally like the athletes that can do those things, swing the bat fast, run fast. I don't know. It's like a bias of mine, and maybe it's going to cause me to miss Perdomo. But the one thing I can say and wrap myself in a blanket as I cry myself to sleep next year and Perdomo wins the MVP is that the composite projections say that Perdomo is the 14th or 15th best shortstop and he's going as the 6th or 7th.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I will cry myself to sleep, is the composite projections told me so.
I think the last thing I'll say for now, before we dig into him in like a mechanical sort of level with Jed, is switch hitters can take a little more time. Wholesale swing changes, especially, I think, will deke projections every time. It's like unlocking a completely new elite pitch, right? And I just don't know if we quantify hitting in ways that give us confidence the way we do with pitching. And I think that's part of what's missing for me here. So I've just tried to leave my mind open to this possibility that as a switch hitter who might have more of like an Alex Bregman-ish feel for hitting. Like he's got enough power when he needs it, right? Like I think he might have those traits, and I think those maybe have been previously like overlooked. And I think when you have those traits and you add a little bit of bat speed, that little bit of bat speed you added actually goes a very long way. I think that's what we saw with Geraldo Perdomo.
A huge W for seeing this one like 3 years ago. I mean, it's crazy.
I'm going to chop off half the W and politely hand it back to you just because I didn't have 10 teams with Perdomo on it last year. Like if I was a true believer, I would have had Perdomo everywhere last year. But I did see stuff I liked in the profile previously. Did I see a player like this coming? Of course not. Like I'm not going to pretend like I did. But sometimes it doesn't look good on the StatCast page, and there's still something to get excited about. I think that's the longer term takeaway.
Regressionisto, and I've got him on my do not draft. Not necessarily do not draft list, but he is italicized. I bold the ones I want.
All right, so you need him to fall a couple rounds before you're actually thinking about it. You pick 75, just not happening for you as it pertains to Perdomo. There is a little bit of a shelf, though. You start to see more warts the further you go down. That's true of any position you look at. ADP Tier 3, which begins after pick 100, includes Trevor Story, Bichette, Corey Seager, all lumped pretty close together in terms of where they have been going here in the January draft market. You get a little bit of a gap before you get to Willy Adames, and then you get Dansby Swanson. And I don't think Willy Adames and Dansby Swanson can ever get that far away from each other in projections, in draft position. They just seem like they're somehow forever linked as pretty similar players, even though they get there in just slightly different ways from a 5x5 perspective. Trevor Story, I think, I just want to give him his flowers for being healthy, man. He's been through a lot in terms of major injuries. He showed that he still has some early round skills last year. He was the number 21 hitter in the Fangraphs Player Rater in 5x5 leagues. The concerns I have are a few things. The chase rate has surged over the last 2 seasons, so the aggression is going to start to bite him. He's on the wrong side of 30. The health grade is still really low, even though he played 157 games last year. Really, if you look at the first 3 seasons in Boston, add them all up, he only played a handful more games than that in all 3 of those seasons combined. There's some good in there. He's kind of split neutral last year. He is an everyday shortstop. He was very efficient as a base stealer, 31 for 32. It's just a question of how long he's going to hold up physically, and if the chasing that he's doing drags the OBP down, if that keeps him low in the order, because that could really do a number on his counting stats. But I'm curious if you see a little more good than I do in Story's bounce back a year ago.
Well, I'm gonna look like I'm going back on my first principles because I love the athletes, but the problem is Trevor Story's 33 years old, and if you look at what he's done, I think he's really beholden to his athleticism. He chases. He doesn't take walks. He doesn't get the most out of his bat speed. He has good bat speed at times, and the barrel rate's only okay. And if you look at his percentiles over the last 3 years, what leaps out to me is even though he still has good sprint speed, the bat speed determines his barrel rate, and it's only going to go down at 33. And look at 2024 when he had 70th percentile sprint speed in between 2 86s and 82s. He was not very good at stolen bases either. He wasn't stealing a lot of bases. So I would, if I was going to project him next year, I'd give him 75th percentile sprint speed. So I would take a degradation in his sprint speed. I wouldn't necessarily project his bat speed to get better. So I would project for his barrel rate to get worse. I would project for his hard hit rate to get worse. And then we go back to the health tool. Why would somebody that just came off a season where he was healthy and did all these things, why would you just ignore all the health that came before? I mean, yes, a pitcher can get Tommy John surgery and get it right and fix something that had been bothering him and maybe be healthy for a long stretch of time. But with Story, it was a myriad of injuries. It wasn't just one thing that he finally got fixed. If I'm wrong on that, feel free to bring it up in the Discord. But I would suggest that this is a guy who's had a lot of problems in a lot of different places, and I don't necessarily have him. I have him on my do not draft list. I mean, if he drops, I have him equal to Willy Adames. I've been equal to Swanson, so he belongs in this tier by composite projection. So if he drops below all those guys and he's still out there, then maybe I'm in.
Yeah, it's another need a 2 or 3 round discount. We talked about some of the young starting pitchers that start to go around this range. I don't think I'm really in on Story, Bichette, or Corey Seager, just based on what else is out there and how they project compared to some of the shortstops that go behind them. They're all for slightly different reasons. With Bichette, we've talked about the defensive concerns, the erosion of his gloves, probably going to move him off shortstop sooner rather than later, and maybe that could be in 2026, depending on where he lands as he makes his move through free agency. Bichette hits what he should hit, though, and he's got a great bat-to-ball ability, right? Keeps the Ks down. It's an unusual roto profile for a shortstop, though, because the steals just aren't there. He's 14 for 21 over the last 3 seasons combined. Average is a big part of the profile. You're getting a boost
I think
here.
that's why I'm interested in Bichette and Seager, is that I think that sometimes we don't think of average enough because we're so focused on getting our 300 steals and getting our 180, our 180 steals and getting our 300 homers, that we forget that there's also that batting average category. I know there's a lot of, year-to-year variation in batting average, but these guys are proven batting average contributors.
Right, and I think the best case for both of them is that you loaded up on power and speed with your first, let's say, maybe 4 or 5 hitters that you took before them. You took on some batting average risk with 1 or 2 of those guys, and you need to correct that. And both should be in productive lineups. I think the Rangers might be a little closer to league average, but I imagine whoever throws the money down for Bo is going to have at least a top 10 sort of lineup. So the counting stats should be good. Expectations will be that they're playing every day when they're not on the IL. So I think you have to consider that too. And that's, to me, kind of the big difference with Seager in the NFBC universe versus everywhere else. In leagues where I have an IL spot, I'm much more inclined to take him at a price like this. In leagues where I don't, I know I'm buying into a guy that's just had a lot of stuff go wrong. So you go back 4 seasons ago, 663 plate appearances. Yay, it's great. Down to 536, 533, and now 445. The good news is, if you want to bump him back into the 500, like the low 500 range, you can comfortably do that. The reason he missed time at the end of last season was an appendectomy. So unless Corey Seager grows a second appendix that also needs to be removed, you don't have to worry about that as a chronic problem, right?
That'd be a first.
I don't think that's ever happened before.
I've got Seager with 508 plate appearances and being the 9th best, or the 9th, because Mookie Betts didn't show up on here for some reason. So he's like right around Mookie Betts. So 9th or 10th best shortstop by composite projection.
Yeah, I mean, Seager chased less than he did in a season since 2018, a year ago. And he had a 15% barrel rate for the 3rd year in a row. So he hits the ball very hard. He's a very, very good hitter. He's an elite hitter with well below average health grades. That's just what he is. And every year we talk about players like this. Byron Buxton was like this for a long time. It takes a different sort of approach to build around them. You have to be really careful with your risk tolerance elsewhere if he's a big part of your plan. So relative to overall projection and what he's capable of doing, Corey Seager's undervalued. But this type of player burns me all the time because I never seem to build around them correctly. So that's where I'm trying to be a little more mindful of how I actually put the pieces together.
You mentioned not having IL slots. There's a couple things that occur to me about sort of draft and holds. In draft and holds, you don't have IL slots. Health is really important. However, you do have other shortstops. And I will say that the sort of last 5 to 10 shortstops out of the top 30 are not great assets. And if you're going to try and get 3 workable shortstops in draft and hold, which is kind of what you want, then you're going to have a hard time. Like, think about the math. You're in a 15-team league. You want 3 shortstops. You better get your shortstops early, because shortstop is also not the position where there are some players that don't play shortstop regularly that will have shortstop eligibility. That is true. There will be some, but they're not a lot. Shortstop is usually kind of, you have a shortstop and that's your shortstop, so that's why it's difficult to get to that 3 number sometimes. And so this might be a good place where if you took Neto early, you could double up on the health risk with Seager, but you'll always have a top end shortstop in your lineup.
I would probably consider, if I had Seager in my build, going to a shortstop in the middle. Infield, generally I do that anyway, and a shortstop in utility. I think I might be a little more careful with UT only players if I'm going to take an early injury risk player like this. And the reason being, as you get to the bottom of that shortstop pool, you're right. The playing time is just not there. The quality of player just evaporates at the end of the pool. So you might want 3 shortstops on your roster in places you use them for the times in which Seager is not available, because then shortstop and middle still covered by really good high volume players. And then you're just backfilling into a UT spot instead of worrying about shortstop on the fly.
One last thing about Seager and even Story. As much as I don't like Story, I think Seager and Story are the last guys here that could put up top 5 type shortstop seasons. That could, once you're talking about, I like Dansby Swanson. Dansby's in this tier, right? I like Dansby Swanson. He projects to be, kind of a $12, $13 shortstop, 15th best shortstop. Guess what that is? That's oops. I want a top 15 shortstop and I didn't get one. I'm okay with Dansby Swanson because he seems very projectable, high floor. There's no way Dansby Swanson puts up a top 5 shortstop season. I just don't see it at all.
But the only way he doesn't play is if he gets hurt. He's a guy every single day in a lineup that should be a top 5, if not even slightly better than that lineup. Could be a top 3 lineup that the Cubs have put together. He's a little more balanced than Adames in terms of the categorical deficiencies. The average isn't great, but it's also, we haven't seen a 217 and a 238 from Dansby Swanson. We see a lot of 240s. That's fine. That's where he hurts you a little bit. Runs will be there. RBIs will be there. It's like maybe a 2020 profile still. So I'm fine with Dansby Swanson, ideally as a middle infielder in a 15-team league, but he doesn't have top 5 ceiling, but he has a very good chance of finishing top 10 at the position, even though he doesn't get drafted as a top 10 guy. So that's what I really like about him. Adames, I think it was a really slow start last year after signing the big deal with San Francisco. We see that a lot. Guys sign a new big deal. They press a little bit initially. They get more comfortable. We didn't see as many steals. That was to be expected. He went 21 for 25 in his final year with the Brewers. Still went 12 for 16 last year with the Giants. That probably gives you a better idea of what to expect in that category going forward. I think there's a point about the average forward guys like Bichette and Seager and the average being an underrated roto category. Willy Adames was the 66th hitter in the player rater. I think he's better than that because of the slow start. He's probably typically going to be like a 40 to 50 range bat. So he's fine where he's going right now. He's a max PT volume guy. He was a 25th ranked hitter in the second half for what it's worth. But compare that to, Bo Bichette and where he went just because of the difference in average. Like, that's a pretty big gap at the end of the year in actual value just because of where they get their respective production from. So I'm just looking at Willy Adames and saying, yeah, I'm taking a big hit in batting average. Maybe I'm making up some ground in power and RBIs relative to where I'm drafting him.
And he is why it is good sometimes not to take the Elly early or not to take even Neto. I should have brought up, not a great batting average there. So if you keep your batting average high, and I think this is especially important in 10 and 12 team leagues, is to keep your batting average high as long as possible, because there's always going to be a guy like Willy Adames that you can get for less than the market thinks, than the mess the room thinks, that you can jump to if you kept your batting average high.
Yeah. I think that's really well stated. But when you look at the player rater from last year and you see Bo and Adames as close together as they are, it's like, wow, it's surprising because Bo doesn't run. Well, it's like Bo hits for average, like well above average. And that actually makes a pretty big difference in their respective values.
We don't do maybe enough head-to-head analysis, but like in head-to-head, Adames in a punt batting average strategy, I mean, you could pair Adames and Neto and be picking behind ADP, like be picking players that are better than their ADP, and have a ton of home runs and stolen bases and not a great batting average, and just make it part of a punt strategy.
Let's move on to ADP tier 4. So now we're getting outside the top 150 overall. It's another odd group of 4. It includes Jacob Wilson, Ezequiel Tovar, Konnor, Griffin, and Otto Lopez. I will say Xavier Edwards also goes in this range. We'll talk about him probably a bit more on the second base episode because he played more at second than at short. We decided to split him up this way. It doesn't matter. You can think of him as a shortstop if you want to. But let's start with Wilson. Even if you gave him the prorated full season from his rookie campaign, it's probably more like 16 homers, 7 to 8 steals, maybe 75 to 80 each in the runs and RBI categories, but with a 311 average. It's just an unusual player because there's probably not a lot more power for him to tap into, even though he's playing in such a hitter-friendly environment. I think you have to look at Wilson and say, you might believe he's the clear-cut best option to be the leadoff guy for a team that has a lot of thump. And as a result, you may end up with a guy that could maybe lead the league in batting average and be among the league leaders in runs scored. It's just not the two roto categories we're always the most excited about.
Yeah, there's something weird going on too. Steamer has him with a 472 plate appearance projection. If you are in a room with other people using Steamer projections, he's going to be severely undervalued. And that's even pulling my composite projections down. And in fact, the bat only has 597 plate appearances for him. And Fangraphs depth charts of the high ones on Wilson with 609 plate appearances. What are we talking about here? He's 23 years old. Yeah, he had a hamstring injury, but he could have 670 plate appearances this year. So I'm looking now at my composite projections, which say should be the 17th best shortstop with a $10 projection and 11 homers and 56 runs and 55 RBI and 5 stolen bases. And I'm like, I'm taking the over on every single number here.
Yeah.
Right? So
it looks
be
good.
careful with your playing time projections. This is the big one. This is a really big one. If you give him 650 plate appearances, I think he zooms up into the back end of the top 10 of shortstops. He could, what's the difference between like him and Bichette? Think about it. Like 290 average, 17 homers, 6 stolen bases projection for Bichette. And that puts Bichette in the top 10 by composite projections. Why can't Jacob Wilson beat some of those numbers?
Right. The key
Not
is the
17.
It's the power output.
Yeah.
If you look at Bo last year, only the 4 steals, 18 homers, 94 and 78 for runs and RBIs. Like that all seems doable for Wilson. It's
so I'm not saying he will
homers.
Be better than Bichette. I'm just saying
that's the ceiling though. Like a ceiling is like a $20 player. That's good from this range.
Yeah.
It's definitely middle infield territory, not starting shortstop territory though. I think you want to make sure that you've got someone you really like at the position before you're thinking about Jacob Wilson. So,
but
some
if
people
you
are
took
scared
Dansby
away by it 'cause
Swanson,
it's weird.
If you took Dansby Swanson, you could double up. I mean, I'm not saying like they would be right next to each other, but you could in your next pick or in pick after that take Wilson, because if you took Dansby Swanson, you didn't take much upside.
Right.
So, you could throw in Jacob Wilson to be like, hey, I need some upside here at this position.
Yeah, Ezequiel Tovar goes in this range too. Still just 24, even though he debuted back in 2022. Slash line really went back down to the 2023 levels. He was hurt, a little banged up. He's already been extended. He's got a great glove, so he's going to play a ton. Might be the leadoff guy for this Rockies lineup. He's always going to be at or near the top of the O-swing percentage leaderboard. That's just sort of part of how he hits. That's just
worry
what he
about
does.
that when he's 30. Worry about that when he's 31.
The keys here is that he gets a very friendly home park for half his games. He might actually be fine or good in average, even if he's not good in OBP. And he's shown more than 20 home run pop in a season once already. So I think he's a little underrated because I think through the lens that we usually evaluate players, looking through Fangraphs and Savant and some of the decision-making metrics, he's not good, but he does a lot of things well enough for his age to be pretty undervalued in this spot.
I've got Tovar by composite projections worth $1 less than CJ Abrams.
Okay.
He goes 150 picks later.
Yeah.
Tovar's a top 12, he's like the 11th best, 12th best shortstop, like by composite projections. I don't know. Maybe one way, if you if you didn't take part in the shortstop bonanza early on, maybe the idea here is to take a say no thanks to the middle at all, and maybe take 2 or 3 guys at the end. Tovar, Swanson, Wilson. Like, why not? That's an interesting approach. It'll cost you a lot less, and you might have a decent amount of stolen bases and upside and batting average. You know,
I'd be sweating pretty hard though if I was like waiting 8 to 10 picks for my turn to come up and I was trying to execute a strategy like that. But
you don't need to get all 3, because you could just say, I'm going to get 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that game of chicken can be a little risky at shortstop in particular, because if you're light in terms of production at shortstop, it's going to hurt you badly. It's one of the worst positions to be short on playing time, short on skills at, I think. And you have prospects. One of them goes somewhat early, Connor Griffin. I mean, Steamer and Oopsie are pretty close in their projections. They get him in the high 250s for average, right around 400 for the slug, 15 plus homer pop if he were up all year, 25 to 30 steal speed. Griffin played 21 games at AA last year, and we talked about the report a few weeks ago that the Pirates were going to give him a shot at the opening day roster. This seems like a fair effort to try and max out what they have around Paul Skeens. The historical tendencies of the Pirates make this hard to believe, but if anyone can do it and just come up and produce, I mean, what Griffin has done so far in the minor leagues is very convincing.
He's been. I mean, the Pirates have been acting a little differently this offseason, right? They actually have spent a little money. They've traded for guys, and they seem to be a little bit of a win now situation. I'll also say this: as much as I have in the past, like, not wanted to take part in the hype rookies, that, you know, we famously didn't take part in Bobby Witt Jr.'s rookie season because he was going in like the 4th round. And I was like, God, there's so many established players here. Why would I do that? Connor Griffin is in that sort of Jackson Chourio, sweet spot where he's not costing you an established player. If you take Connor Griffin instead of Dansby Swanson and then take, we'll talk about them later, but I have Xander Bogaerts as projected to almost be Dansby Swanson's equal. Almost exactly. So, like, hey, why don't you say Connor Griffin? And I think there's enough here where you can do a too late shortstop and do something. Connor Griffin and Xander Bogaerts, that's interesting. Jacob Wilson and Dansby Swanson, that's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can play this end game.
I want to be mindful of what you're saying. Is I respect this as a way you can play. You have to be careful not to turn this into the reverse of one red paperclip. You don't want to start at the top and trade down so many times. There's
trade
nothing
a house
left
for a paperclip at the end.
Yeah, like you had a mansion, now you have a paperclip because you kept waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I do think there is a point around this chunk of the board where you can fall off the cliff, so to speak, and lose. So just before you try to employ the strategy that Eno is putting out there, think really, really hard about how much you like some of the other guys we're going to talk about on this episode. I mean, I think your broader point, Griffin right now lives more like where Chourio did or Julio before his spring training the year he got. I mean, like right now you can get in and take the chance and be like, hey, let's just see what happens. And if I'm wrong, I'm only out a pick 200 pick. Like that's now, like it's fine.
Players in the 200 range are already, I think, a less than 50-50 bet to make it to the end of the season on your roster.
Yeah. What happens if Griffin comes up, goes off in spring training, and ends up with an ADP of 90 going into the final week of the drafts? Then we're going to have are we scared? Do we really like this increased price? Like that conversation might be coming, at some point in, I don't know, 2 months, I guess. But I'm intrigued at the current price. I just think it depends on what else you've done if you're actually going to try and make Connor Griffin a part of your redraft roster in 2026. Other player in the group, though, from the Marlins middle infield, Otto Lopez, pretty quiet 15-15 season last year. He did it with an 86 WRC+, but he does bring a good glove to the table. The Marlins don't have a ton of competition, but you have talked about Javier Sanoa as someone that could be a big part of their lineup, even though he can move around too. It's a sub 15% K rate with a 38% hard hit rate. Kind of a nice combo for Lopez there. I was trying to figure out like what happened to him over the course of the year. Maybe the league figured him out a little bit. Like on the one hand, he was okay right on right. He was a 107 WRC plus against same-handed pitching, but he only hit 4 homers in the second half in 64 games. So I'm looking at Lopez and wondering if something else is there, but not feeling convinced enough to say, yes, I'm taking him over a Xander Bogaerts who goes in the next tier, and I'm taking him over Ha-Seong Kim, and I'm taking him over Colson Montgomery, who could be feast or famine, but showed a lot of power. Like, just feels to me like Lopez is a slight overdraft. He reminds me a little bit of how the market treated Luis Rengifo in recent years.
Yeah, I don't have something I hang my hat on where I'm like, oh, this is something I want. This would be something I'd sort of sigh and say, well, I didn't get a second shortstop, and this is what I'm getting, But there is an interesting statistical note. You bring up his splits. So against lefties in his career, he has a 51 WRC plus. He's a righty. And, you could say, well, that's a big problem because that's what he's supposed to be doing well. But I would suggest it is not a problem. In fact, that might be where he gets better because a 331 plate appearance sample against lefties is nothing. If you want to project a player for reverse platoon splits, you need to have 4 times that as a sample. So you are never going to project him to have reverse platoon splits. I mean, you wouldn't for another 5-10 years almost. So like the deal here is that Otto Lopez is probably going to be a little bit better than against lefties next year. The fact that he's fine right on righty in the big sample is actually a good sign that he's holding above water. And so he's a boring player. I don't think he's going to jump into the stratosphere. I don't think he's capable of a top 10 shortstop season, but he's fine. In deep leagues, he's fine. I don't know that his OBP will be very good, and I don't know where he'll hit in that lineup. That lineup is going to improve, but he may be a bottom half guy despite his speed. But
I want him to show up with like 2 miles an hour of extra bat speed this spring. And then I can get excited, right? Because he makes good enough decisions. He squares it up. Like there's stuff there. It's just like it's deep league stuff for me. It's not. I'm excited to take him late in a 10-team league because I think I'm going to pull one over everybody and come out way ahead in my middle infield spot. I just think he fits fine in deep leagues, and there's a few guys that go in the next tier that I like just a little bit better because I am a weirdo, and I still believe in a few of these guys being better than the market.
You still believe in Xander Bogaerts? No way.
I will always believe in Xander Bogaerts. I don't know why exactly. I should probably talk to my therapist about that. Like, why do I like this guy so much? Like that'd be a great question to start with next time I go to therapy. Like, why do I like Xander Bogaerts so much? The confusion in the room would be off the charts.
After all my Xander slander, I'm back in.
Oh, you're back in now.
Throw up the market lower than composite ranks. These are the players that the market is lower on than they should be. Ezequiel Tovar is on here. Xander Bogaerts is on here. Corey Seager, Bichette. All the guys that I've been talking up a little bit. This is part of the reason why. I'm back in on Xander Bogaerts. I just, if he has a very similar profile to Otto Lopez, and in fact is supposedly going to be worth more by composite projections than Otto Lopez, then I would rather take Xander Bogaerts because I think that offense in San Diego is going to be better. I think, it was a little bit of a down year for the Padres last year, but I think they will be better next year. And overall, I'll just take, if we're talking floor, Otto Lopez seems he has more floor than ceiling, then I'll take the floor of a guy with a great hit tool that's still stealing bases and gives you dual eligibility to boot. And I think he'll get pretty close to 15-15.
Yeah, I blurbed this as follows. I said the 11-year deal is the Padres' problem, not yours.
You're right.
He's got a 10-year run of being under a 20% K rate, career high 20 steals last year. He's not going to hurt you in average. And literally on the rundown, my blurb, I wrote, a safer version of Otto Lopez? Better health could nudge him back toward the top 15 at the position for another year. Betting on a 33-year-old shortstop to be healthier is probably the risky part of all that. But I agree with what you said about the Padres lineup. We like it better than the Marlins lineup. Floor is just really, really solid with Xander Bogaerts. So kind of stands out to me from this bunch of who's the safest here? What's the guy that goes second earliest of the bunch? The guy that goes earliest in the group, José Caballero, Man, he just doesn't end up on my teams. I think he's as close to a one category player as you can have right now. He's a career 228 hitter, over 1,100 big league plate appearances. I think people are drafting him right now because he's eligible at second, third, and the outfield too. And he's going to get probably a month to be the Yankees starting shortstop, maybe a little longer, depending on how Anthony Volpe recovers from shoulder surgery. So it seems to me that Caballero is almost like a specific draft and hold sort of play, rather than somebody you want in a league where you're making daily or weekly pickups.
Yeah, I also don't like the fact that there's at least a non-zero chance he loses his job after a month. I mean, Anthony Volpe still exists, and the composite ranks say that he's better than where he's being taken even. Volpe does project to be a minus glove shortstop, which is problematic given that his offense hasn't been great. Maybe Caballero keeps it all year, but maybe he doesn't. And so you have to bake that risk into it, and that's why he does not show up. Caballero does not show up in my top 20 shortstops by the composite ranks.
I feel like Colson Montgomery is a player you should like because he hits the ball very hard. I mean, a 14.4% barrel rate. The homers were coming in bunches last year. He has to struggle pretty badly to really lose his job and get demoted back to AAA. The injury history is probably the main concern with Montgomery. I mean, you could also maybe ask yourself this question: did he feast on fastballs, and can he reduce the chase as he gets more time against top-level pitching? Like, how much do you think the decisions will actually improve once we move further beyond the first half of a season we've seen Montgomery in the bigs?
The chase isn't even that bad. I mean, according to league average, he was basically league average chase and above league average zone swing. So his selectivity would, I think, rate is actually slightly above average. I think there's just an innate swing and miss quality, something about his swing shape that is going to lead to high strikeout rates. But if you want like a low batting average, big slugger with no steals at shortstop, go for it. I just think it's a bit of a weird fit. You'll have to have your 30-30 player in the outfield instead. You're going to have to get your steals from somebody. The nice thing about outfield is there's 5 outfield slots. And so if you just take Colson Montgomery for your MI or something instead of, one of those guys in the outfield slots, it might make sense. I do like his bat speed, and I just think it'll come with such a bad batting average that most leagues won't want to play him.
There was an answer to the fastball question too. My assumption was that he just crushed fastballs and didn't hit anything else. But of the 21 homers he hit after he got promoted, 11 off fastballs, 6 off breaking balls, 4 off speed pitches. He slugged 600 against breaking balls. So I don't think breaking stuff, at least in the early going, has been the problem for Montgomery. There might just be,
but with that high a whiff rate, there's a chase. There's a problem. There's a possibility, at least, that there's a hole in the zone somewhere that people can pick apart.
Yeah, that's the part where I'm like, he's not helpless against them, but there's a flaw that might be exploited over a full season. He's interesting where he goes, but I have not been tempted yet to put Colson Montgomery on any of my 2026 teams. Still some time for that to change. Ha-Seong Kim goes in this range. It's a $20 million bet from Atlanta that he's going to be better with health. And you're here for speed. You're here for plate skills. Maybe you're looking for 250 plus in the average, low double-digit homers, 20 steals, 70-ish runs, and maybe 50 plus RBIs. I mean, that plays fine in a deeper league. It might even be a temporary, okay option for something more shallow. But can we look at 2023 and point to that as a still attainable upper end range? He hit 260 that year, popped 17 homers, and stole 38 bases with 144 combined runs and RBIs, which put him easily inside the top 100 overall.
I don't know. It's a lot of time to miss. It's and didn't he come back and have another injury? It was a different injury.
Yeah, he came back from shoulder surgery, and I think it was hamstring or quad.
Yeah,
leg injury.
So I just, he's a great. I think he's like a draft and hold third shortstop. I don't think I really want to start him. But if you're in a 15, maybe if you're in a 20 teamer and you I mean, I have him ranked. I guess by composite, I have him ranked 23rd. So there's some uses for him.
That's like a bench MI probably.
Yeah, or back end MI, starting MI in 15 teams. Yeah.
Yeah, still draftable. I think it's safe at the price based on expectations, but I don't think there's a guarantee of him getting back to that 2023 level. I think it's been a sub 400 slug every year we've seen Kim in the big leagues, so it could be buried in the bottom third of that Atlanta lineup too, or it only getting moved up against lefties. I think that could be one thing that works against them for the counting stats as well. Carlos Correa goes in this range. He's also third base eligible. He actually got to 580 plate appearances for the fourth time in the last 5 seasons. I was surprised Houston brought him back at the trade deadline. He's still there, of course. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. But the weird thing is, the last time Carlos Correa stole a base, it was 2019. And the last time he hit 20 homers in a season, it was 2022. I mean, this is like a lighter version of Xander Bogaerts without the speed or something. Unless you're thinking he's much more comfortable in Houston and he can get a little pull happy at the ballpark there, I just don't see it anymore with Correa. And for years, I kind of liked him as that sub or that after pick 200, help me in average, do pretty good things in the counting stats sort of player. I think he's just a filler now.
I think he'll maybe have a slightly higher ranking among third basemen, and so he's maybe more useful for your draft and holds to cover short and third, and be a single body that gets you basically up to 3 in both of those. I mean, third base is hard. Sometimes it can get hard in draft and holds to cover your third baseman and your third shortstop, and I think they come up in the same places in the player pool. And so if you could just be like, this is my third shortstop and my third baseman, that might be the best use for him, I think, because I don't think you want to depend on him starting wise with that kind of player, that kind of playing time outlook.
Yeah, mono leagues maybe. Like there's some value there, but I don't really like him very much in mixers. And then there's Mason Wynn. Injuries brought a step back in his second full season. I think he's still a very good real-life shortstop. Even around the injuries last year, he was like over a 3-WAR player. Better health, I think, could maybe get that running game going. I'm thinking more like 15 to 20 steals, nothing absurd. I saw this in his RotoWire player outlook. Wynn reportedly began feeling soreness in his knee in late May, early June. He finished the first 2 months of the season with a 276, 352, 435 line and 6 homers. So things were going better for him before that knee injury popped up. Still young enough to get a lot better. And as we're seeing with this youth movement in St. Louis, obviously is their shortstop of the present and probably their shortstop of the future too.
I have him projected into the top 20 among shortstops. I think he's a better option than a lot of guys in this tier. And I think that he will set a career high in stolen bases this year.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be to the moon, but it's going to be, I think, a pretty solid effort from Mason Wynn coming off that. Should be fine for the start of spring training too. So health-wise, things are tracking in the right direction. Beyond pick 300, there is an interesting cast of characters. I mean, there's prospects. JJ Weatherholt, I think, is going to come up and probably play in the middle infield with Wynn, but more likely to play second than short in situations where Wynn is healthy. Kevin McGonigal tops some prospect lists. He could be up, I think, end of the season.
He was the talk of the fall league, and just the fact that he played the fall league, there's at least a non-zero chance that the reason he was playing the fall league was to prepare himself for a 650 plate appearance full season, which is only can happen if you play in the big leagues.
Right.
So, it's not incredible to think of it there, but, even McGonigal himself, there's some interesting questions about how his bat speed relates to, is he this guy that's just going to get the most out of his bat speed and just pull everything in the air? They definitely seemed like that was his approach, while we saw him in the fall league. But some people have him, as a top 3 prospect in the minor leagues. And if there's any argument that Connor Griffin might be ready to go, then you should apply that argument to McGonigal, who goes later.
I had to pull out the old Bug a Beat Writer card. I checked in with Cody Stavenhagen this morning and just asked if he were projecting McGonigal's debut right now. Would late August 2026 make the most sense? And he said, yeah, it's probably the safest guess. Not impossible he could make the opening day roster, but assuming they won't have him skip AAA, you probably have to preserve rookie status. And they've got enough depth right now where they could sort of see what happens this spring, right? If McGonigal comes in and just mashes in the spring, maybe they rethink things. But I'm looking at him as a slightly further away option than Weatherholt, even if McGonigal maybe has a higher ceiling. That's probably even worth a debate at some point down the road. The reason being, 46 games at AA was the most advanced level for McGonigal, because I'm going to say AA is harder than the fall league. Maybe that's controversial. I don't think it is. So he could go back to
the
AA,
or at least bad this year.
It was a pretty bad fall league this year. I think he needs a little more time. Weatherholt got up to AAA in the card system, right? And I think now that Arenado is on his way to Arizona, they got another spot open. Gorman could play third. Wien could play short. I assume Donovan's getting traded. Weatherholt could play second. This is a guy that I think did a lot last year between AA and AAA. 17 homers. He was 23 for 26 on the base pass. That was over 109 games combined. Had a 48.1% hard hit rate. And his 40-plus game sample at the highest level was at AAA. So I think they've maybe answered the last question, the final test for JJ Weatherholt already.
We are in a draft and hold tier, so I don't feel so bad talking about draft and hold, but I will say that in draft and hold strategy, I tend away from Weatherholt and McGonigal types because I have no free agency to if Weatherholt and McGonigal don't play in the big leagues this year, they are full on zero on my roster. And so I will tend towards a couple other players in this tier. Chase Mydroth and Josh Smith are some of my favorites in draft and hold season. I have used both of them. Josh Smith in particular plays every position. He's not even available at second yet, but he's probably going to be their starter at second base, and he's available at first, short, second, eventually, and I think third as well. So Josh Smith is a perfect way to paper over any parts of your roster that are a little bit problematic. Plus, I think he has starting level upside just because if you give him 600 plate appearances, even his composite projections agree he'll be double digit in homers and steals. So I love Josh Smith as a floor raiser in draft and holds. And Chase Mydroth, a little bit different. He's only available at second and short. But again, if you push his projections to more of a 600 plate appearance level, he'll get double digits in both. I think that this team can't not have him at the top of their roster because he's such a good on-base percentage guy. And he plays better defense than Sosa. So I think he's a natural fit right there at second base, starting all year. Chase Mydroth, what's he going to go? 15-15 with a 250 average and a 360 OBP. I mean, why not? I like those two. Those are good. They're on my good kid list.
Those are guys that I think absolutely fit in the format you described in draft and hold. But if we're talking about a typical 10 or 12 team league where you're cutting players, you're definitely taking the prospects and just letting those guys go to the wire, letting Mydroth go to the wire, Josh Smith go to the wire.
Yeah, 250, 10-10. You're not salivating for that in a 10 or 12 team league.
Nope. No. I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear on the difference. Like, yeah, you're playing in draft and holds, then you have to think a little more carefully about that. But I would say of the prospects at shortstop, I think Weatherholt's the guy that I'm starting to look at after Griffin as the one that cost-wise makes a lot of sense and playing time-wise could actually exceed expectations here in 2026. Volpe goes in this range. We talked about it earlier. He had surgery to repair labrum tear in his non-throwing arm. Not expected to play at all in April, so the timetable for non-IL leagues is already a little bit tricky. You're getting a massive discount, and I'd be on the side that thinks that maybe we'll still see one more level from Volpe if he recovers well from shoulder surgery, but not necessarily a must-draft player in leagues where you don't have any moves that you can make either, just based on that timeline and some of that uncertainty. What about Brooks Lee? Doesn't run much for a shortstop. Maybe the Twins' late-season aggression actually spills over into 2026. I'm not really sure. But a 38.5% hard hit rate paired with a sub 20% strikeout rate last year. He's a little older than you think. He's going to be 25 in February, but I think Brooks Lee plays a lot for the Twins this year.
I do too. I'm a little bit worried that the StatCast defensive projection matches some of the worry that he wasn't a defensive shortstop. He's got a -6 run projection at the position, which is around JP Crawford at the bottom of the position. It's a little bit better than Bichette to tell you where Brooks Lee ranks as a defensive shortstop. And I think that might matter a little bit because of Kylan Culpepper, who already played a bunch at AAA last year. And they may at some point have had enough of Brooks Lee defensively at shortstop and decide that it's time to go to Culpepper.
Yeah, Culpepper, it looks better than expected so far as a pro at shortstop, and he might be the real shortstop of the future for the Twins. So definitely worth keeping an eye on that. Some other oatmeal-y guys go in this range. JP Crawford, what you see is what you get. The defense is slipping, but for really deep leagues, you could do a lot worse looking for that third or possibly fourth shortstop for depth purposes.
Sorry, Culpepper only made Double-A, but he's pretty close, and he's 23 years old, so.
Yeah, he should, by the end of the year, August probably is the timeline for Culpepper. Joey Ortiz kind of in that same oatmeal-y vein. Good glove carrying his playing time, but questions about whether that bat's going to come through.
Ortiz and Crawford are third shortstops and third and fourth shortstops in draft and hold. If you want some upside from your third and fourth draft, I would, instead of Ortiz or Crawford, I think I'd go with Carson Williams.
Yep.
There's a projection there for 13 homers and 10 steals in only 59 plate appearances. And I don't think that they want to turn to Taylor Walls. I think if you say, yes, Taylor Walls' defense is going to be better, but Carson Williams' defense is not bad. And then his offensive upside is what they need. I mean, that's Carson Williams being like a really good player offensively is the difference between the Rays competing and not, I feel like, because they're always like have a high floor, decent team. They're better than people think. But if Carson Williams is like a 4 or 5 win player next year, then they will be in the mix for, in that division or for the wild card. So I think they're just going to play Carson Williams every day and just, take what he gives them.
I mean, if Colson Montgomery could come up in a half season and do what he did for the White Sox, is it that odd to think there's a possibility Carson Williams comes up and provides a ton of value? I know the first 32 games were scary because the K rate was above 40%, but that's a really small sample. So you got power, you got speed, you got a great glove. He was pounding the ball on the ground during his time with the Rays. That's not what he's done profile-wise throughout his time in the minors. So yeah, Carson Williams, very interesting upside play where he goes late. The other name before we go that I think is interesting is Aiden Miller. I think if you want to see an upside player get the call in Philly this year, Aiden Miller's probably that guy, right? Like they can justify
Crawford.
That a few different ways.
I mean, Crawford plays the position of need, though.
Yeah, I trust Aiden Miller's profile at the plate a lot more than Crawford's, though.
Fair.
Yeah.
Crawford beats the ball on the ground, doesn't really hit it that hard, so.
If you're thinking keeper in dynasty leagues, we got prospects we'll talk about that are more relevant for multi-year formats on future episodes. And of course, you can ask us questions in the Discord about names we didn't get to. There's plenty of interesting guys that could play in the big leagues this year that are just even further down in terms of where they're going in these early drafts. All right, on our way out the door, quick recap. Across all these different tiers, who do you think is the undervalued shortstop that you want to get on as many rosters as possible this year?
Ooh, that's tough. You with that description, I think Mason Wynn is a great sleeper, and the reason that I like him is what I was saying earlier about athleticism. This is a guy who has the 77th percentile sprint speed. He doesn't whiff. He's a 79th percentile whiff rate. I think that his medium level bat speed and great strength with the arm is meaning that he's going to play every day at shortstop. He's going to start running some more, and he's going to start turning some of the stuff into power. He was hurt a little bit early last year. He finished really well. I don't think that I can say that Mason Wynn should be on all your teams because I think probably his upside is that of a top 15 shortstop. And I don't know if a top 10, but I do really like him in 15 teamers. And if your league has any depth whatsoever, Mason Wynn would be a great spot. I think the floor is really high too, because the floor is, 15-15 type season, 15-10, and will come with a pretty decent batting average. And they're not gonna play any games with him. He's just gonna play all year.
I think they're not gonna play any games with him is a big part of why I like My shortstop sleeper, Ezequiel Tovar, would be a sleeper more on like a 10 or a 12 team. Like I think he's good enough to make an impact. We saw the power come through in 2024. He popped 26 homers. He just wasn't healthy last season. I know the chase rate, like we talked about, is a concern, but the average probably won't hurt you with half his games coming in Coors. He's going to play every day. His glove drives that playing time. So Ezequiel Tovar really pops for me as an undervalued shortstop. How about someone on the other side? How about a bust that you're worried about at the shortstop position this year?
I'm going to go Trevor Story. I'm just worried about the athleticism, the injury history. I feel like his game is really predicated upon athleticism. And if any of that falls off, which, the numbers say that he should lose bat speed. He should lose sprint speed. That when those things drop off, due to injury or age, he won't be the same player this coming season.
I'm with you on Story. He concerns me. I think after our conversation, I've pivoted. It's CJ Abrams for me. It's just relative to cost. I don't think CJ Abrams is a bad player. I just look at the profile. I don't see ways in which he's going to get a lot better. And I think my concern is he's not a high OBP table setter. So if the Nats lineup gets better, CJ Abrams probably just falls in the lineup. And that actually hurts his roto value a lot for a guy going inside the top 60 overall.
Hurts his stolen base attempts. You attempt fewer stolen bases lower in the lineup.
Yeah, I think he's a nice player, but I think where he's going, there's really only downside at this point for CJ Abrams, despite the fact that he's still just 25 years old. We are going to go. A reminder, you can join our Discord. If you made it all the way to the end of this episode, thank you so much for watching or listening to the entire thing. Be sure to like this video on YouTube. Drop us a nice rating and review wherever you listen to this podcast. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this monstrous episode together. Guess what? Good news. We're back with you on Wednesday as we continue on the left side of the infield at third base.
Thanks for listening.